Hey, what's going on, everyone? This is Dorrani from the VG247 team, and I am joined by Alex and James. Introduce yourself, boys. Say hello.
Hello.
Hello. Perfect
With more
timing.
life, with more gusto. Okay, so we're back with another review discussion. This time is for Resident Evil Village. Alex, what is this? What do you think someone should know first? What do you think that people should know first?
The first thing you should know, I guess, right, is this is a sequel to Resident Evil 7, which I know sounds a bit stupid because it says like 8 hidden right there in the title in the village bit. It says 8, but it is fully a sequel to Resident Evil 7 to the point where I would say if you haven't played Resident Evil 7, you should go and play that game first. It's a sequel in the story sense, it's a sequel in the structure of the game and everything. It's fully connected to that game. I mean, it's got a lot of connections to the rest of the series as well, make no mistake.
Yeah.
But it is, first and foremost, a sequel to Resi 7. And I guess we'll see how you guys feel about it. I mean, I know we've all played it and we've all pretty much, well, I know you and I, Dorrani, have finished it and James is very close to the end now when we record this. And I'm writing the review, and one thing I've written in the review is like the structure is Resident Evil 7 structure. So anyone who played that game, the structure was you had the Baker family. That was one family. You were in their house and you would go, and basically each section of the game was dedicated to one member of that family.
Yeah.
In Village, there are 4 houses, 4 grand houses within the village. And the core sections of the game is there's one section for each house. So like the tall vampire lady that everyone's horny for, she is the head of one of those 4 houses, and her house has a specific gimmick and a specific thing going on with it. And then there's another one, and another one, and another one. And in that sense, it's very similar to Resident Evil 7, and I would even say that there's sort of parallels between the houses. So definitely the vampire stuff is most similar to Jack Baker and the main house, whereas I would say the house that's got the creepy dolls and stuff is probably most similar to Lucas, who had a sort of Saw style section where you were getting your limbs cut off in Resi 7 and stuff. So yeah, it's definitely.
What do you think of that structure?
I think it's fine. I mean, I wrote an article on VG247. We'll see if we can pop a link in the description on YouTube about how I think Resident Evil 7 has some of the best pacing in video game history. Like, the pacing of that game is sublime. And I know not everybody likes some of the later sections. There's a cargo ship segment, which is really combat heavy and stuff. And actually, a very similar segment later on in this game too. And I know that not everyone loves that, but I think overall, the way you ramp up in that game is brilliant. I don't think this is quite as strong in the sense that, I mean, James was talking about this before we started. You come out of the gate in this game, and there's none of this slow, softly. Once the story stuff is out of the way, it's balls to the wall action for the first hour, I guess, right?
Yep. Agreed, definitely. I just want to say, in regards to the sequel, I've never actually, Resident Evil 7, I've never played Resident Evil 7, which is going to be a surprise to a lot of people listening. But yes, I'm one of the few people who have jumped into Village without playing the sequels before. But a good thing that I really enjoyed is the fact that they just summarize it quickly in about 2 minutes. And I was like, right, I feel like I know enough to continue this story now. And I did. I think it was great. I think that was good. So if anyone's listening and wants to know if they can just jump in to this game without having played the rest, yeah, absolutely you can.
Yeah, I guess you'll get a lot more out of it if you have played 7, because this is definitely a direct continuation of that story to the point where the game actively is resolving mysteries that were raised in that game and sort of left dangling and stuff like that. It's also a game that sort of, you can see that it's thinking about the future of the Resident Evil series in a lore and story sense as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, it is totally a lot like Resident Evil 7, and I think if anyone who's expecting it to be very different should just keep that in mind. Like, structurally and everything, it's very similar. The one big difference, I guess, is that it's a lot like Resident Evil 4, which is a very beloved game.
And how so?
4 had, a town, basically, and Resident Evil Village, the second it was announced, people were like, oh, this is like Resident Evil 4, both set in Europe, both set in towns, where the population of the town, there's something wrong with them and stuff like that. In this game, it's vampires and werewolves and all that sort of stuff. And 4 was also a more action-packed game, and so is this. Like we said, it's balls to the wall from the
Yeah.
start. It gives you a lot more weapons a lot quickly. It's like when you get the shotgun in Resident Evil 7, it's like a major event and
Yeah.
it's a big sigh of relief. This game just sort of dumps the shotgun on you quite early, and it's like, here
Yeah.
you go, and then it's dumping rocket launchers on you way earlier than the other games as well. But that's because there's a hell of a lot more combat. There's also the merchant, right?
Yeah. So the merchant name is the Duke. The Duke. And he's actually got an Easter egg referring to his predecessor, which is pretty awesome. Combat wise, I heard that this is leaning into combat way more than the previous Resident Evil games. What do you think of that?
I think there's a bit of a different emphasis in the game generally. I think what we've talked about with how Resident Evil Village leads on from Resident Evil 7 in terms of a direct continuation of the characters and that sort of thing. I think Resident Evil 7 was a bit of a soft reboot for the series as a whole, wasn't it? It was a revitalization after it had kind of lost its way and had gone, some people felt, too heavy into that kind of action-oriented kind
Very
of thing.
camp as well, very silly.
Exactly. And this, with the kind of vampires and werewolves sort of stuff, is a lot more in that kind of campier feel than Resident Evil 7, I feel, which started, it's absolutely disgracefully scarily with the found footage stuff when you're kind of going into the house at the start. I thought that my heart was going to stop. Just, I could barely do it. And this game is a little bit different to that in terms of, I think I've only had to have a coronary bypass like twice. I don't think that it's spookier rather than really, really, really scary. And I think that leans into the kind of action orientated stuff that you feel a lot more powerful. You've got a lot more stuff. You feel a lot more able and equipped to deal with the things that are coming at you, and it feels stronger to
and
kind
even
of attack.
that tracks right with Resident Evil 7 in the sense that at the start of Resident Evil 7, Ethan, the protagonist, is just sort of a random mook. He's a random dude. But then by the end of the game, through the events of the game, he sort of Rambos up. And, he's not quite Chris Redfield by the end of that game, but he's on that path. And even at the start of this game, there's a very brief line of dialogue from him where he mentions having done combat training in the interim between the two games.
Yeah.
And that all sort of, I guess to what you were saying, James, right? Like, if the quiet, creeping terror of like stalking around the Baker house with next to no ammo was your favorite thing of 7, there is little of that in Village in 8. There is a little bit. There's one particular house where it sort of doubles down on the horror and it literally just takes your weapons off you, and it's horrible. It's stomach churning.
The worst.
It's great. One of the best enemies for a horror game in ages, and thematically, really a good thematic fit as well with what's going on in the game story. But other than that, the merchant alone, right? You've got the merchant, but you don't have item boxes. So in Resident Evil 7, you would put stuff in item boxes and be able to access that item box from any save room in the game.
Mm-hmm.
And so you'd hoard items and then take them out as you needed them in order to survive. In this, there's no item boxes because you've just got the merchant. And although you can craft ammo and craft health supplies, even if you run out of crafting resources, which of course are finite, you can go to the shop, go to the Duke, and buy stuff. Now, his stock does deplete, so you can only buy a limited number of health items from him or ammo from him. But it replenishes every time you complete a story milestone, and you can definitely get more than enough off him. And that tells you enough, really, in a sense, of what the game's sort of shooting for. And I think that's fine. I think the action of sort of picking up loot and treasure and selling it back to the Duke to get resources is addictive in its own way, and there's weapon upgrades through the Duke as well, and you can hunt animals out in the village.
Which isn't as robust as I thought it was going to be, by the way. I don't know why I thought it was going to be some crazy system, but it's quite simple, which is good, I guess.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because I sort of I hadn't really read up on that bit prior to getting the game, and I thought when I saw it, I was like, "Oh, I'm going to be able to buy temporary buffs." But no, they
Yeah,
are your upgrades. It's like if you
permanent.
take in a certain number of pieces of chicken, a certain number of pieces of fish, which you can find by hunting around the village, you can just get a permanent buff to, I don't know, your health or how much damage you can protect from by blocking and stuff like
Yeah.
that. And that's, that's
I think I
fine.
prefer it this way. If they would have gone down the route of making this super in depth like crafting system and having like weapon skill trees and yada yada yada, I think that would have been a terrible route to go. So I think I enjoyed the fact that it's just quite simple, considering it's quite a short game as well. It's not extremely long. I feel like there's just enough in there.
Yeah, I think the food thing is the replacement for injecting steroids directly into your chest, which you do in
Yeah.
7, don't you?
Yes.
You
Yeah.
just go, you just like swap them for some shiny coins you've got, and it's just like, here are some steroids out of a birdcage. And
Forgot
yeah,
on that.
that's
Yeah.
not,
Oh my
yeah,
god, the bird cages.
that's not in this one.
Yeah.
Did you guys find this game scary? Just simple question. Did you find this game scary?
I have an interesting relationship with it. I think that dollhouse stuff. There's that one enemy in that house, which is just horrific and awful and terrifying in my opinion. And I hated it in a good way.
Yeah.
Great piece of video game horror. Some people are also going to find the dolls, I think, really creepy.
Yeah.
And I think for other people, your mileage is going to vary. So, tall vampire lady, subject of the desire of many.
Mm-hmm.
This is a slight criticism I have of the game. In the vampire thing, she sort of has the same function as Jack Baker in Resident Evil 7, and Mr. X in Resident Evil 2 Remake, and Nemesis in Resident Evil 3 Remake. And it's so she's a stalker basically. So
Yeah.
once you reach a certain point, she's loose in that house, you're loose in that house, and you're sneaking around trying to complete objectives or reach side stuff without her finding you. And that is scary, except she is sort of, there's nothing that differentiates her from those previous ones that could do that.
Yeah.
And so she
Saying it feels a bit recycled.
she's a great design and everything, but yeah, I mean, it's not as scary because if you have played those games, you already know how to sort of handle that. You've already handled Mr. X and kited around him and made him get lost, and you realize you don't have to be that scared. You can let them swipe at you and then stay back and then run past them when they're in the recovery animation and stuff like that. And so I think your mileage will vary on that, but I think that's one of the prices that Capcom is paying for Resident Evil basically being a yearly franchise at the minute.
Okay. And what about you, James?
In terms of what I think about that, I think we're talking about it in terms of how much action there is kind of minute to minute. There is still that very Resident Evil cadence of quiet, quiet, loud. You are not shooting a dude every 30 seconds.
No.
There are still lots of puzzles to kind of contemplatively kind of figure out and piece together and all of that sort of stuff. There are different the sort of Metroidvania style items that you have to find in one place in the castle or the village and then move them to somewhere else and complete different puzzles there.
Yeah.
It's not like you are just firing rockets at everything all of the time. But by that same token, the just as Alex said, I think it depends on your kind of personal mileage with that sort of stuff. How much you're going to let it play with your head. I think that thinking about doing multiple playthroughs of this game, like with every Resident Evil, it takes you it takes you probably double figures hours to do it the first time, and then you can kind of just leg it through after that. And once you kind of know where everything is, it is more of a sort of, it's almost like a protracted kind of puzzle game that you just sort of running from, you're kind of dodging and weaving through different stuff rather than being
it's no spoiler
scared,
to say. Yeah. It's no spoiler to say my first playthrough of this game was somewhere just south of 9 hours, and that was not rushing. That was just leisurely going through, getting stuck on the occasional puzzle, I'm sure, but I'm quite seasoned at Resident Evil, so I'm sure, like James said, a lot of people it'll be 10, a little bit over 10. But yeah,
Saying
there is
that,
like
yeah, sorry, to compliment what you said, I've never played a Resident Evil game, and 9 hours and 50 minutes, and that was me playing, like trying to capture as much as I can to find as much as I can, because
yeah.
of course we're playing it with a different purpose. Then, well, there's more to me playing it because I have to find everything for review sakes and yada yada yada. But I think that is still quite short considering.
Well, it is and it isn't. So obviously there's classic Resident Evil thing of there's challenges. So this functions the same way it did in the Resident Evil 3 remake. So every time you complete the game, you get points for how you did things. That might be how fast you beat certain bosses, or what challenges you completed, side content you completed, whatever. You can do New Game Plus where you keep all your gear and all your upgrades, but you just play the story again. Um, and also then the points that you earn from those playthroughs can then be spent in a shop to get unlocks, and those unlocks are things like unlimited ammo for weapons,
Mm,
or stuff to view in the model view if you want to get a closer look at some characters, and of course something we're not even going to touch on in this review, which is mercenaries mode, which
yeah,
drops you into the village and sort of is a completely separate mode that lets you do a completely different thing and has been much loved across the series. But there ain't no time for that here. We're just going to
yeah,
focus on the core of the game. So I think there is a lot of replay value there. I mean, I've already completed it twice.
yeah,
So, but I think to my point, yeah, to the point of what we were saying about the size and the length of the game, it's very similar to 7 in the sense that, yeah, probably 8 to 10 hours on your first playthrough, maybe 11 or 12 if you really, really stop and smell the roses.
mm,
But, once you've done that, I think I managed to finish 7 in like 2 hours. I think there's a
yeah,
challenge in this game for beating it under 2.5 hours, I
mm,
think, but that would be just running from objective to objective.
yeah,
But that's part of the joy of these games and has been since the first Resident Evil.
yeah.
Um,
Let's talk about the way it looks just ever so quickly. We've all played it on the PlayStation 5.
yes,
How does it look? What do you think of how it looks?
gorgeous.
The lighting is amazing. I think in every review for a PS5 game that I do, I always talk about the how much kind of global illuminations come along in the last few years.
Yeah,
It just makes everything look so much better. And the I think you mentioned it in your preview video, Dorrani, that
yeah.
the draw distance of how kind of far away you can
Fantastic.
see stuff, the kind of vistas of the castle are incredible.
Yeah.
All that sort of stuff looks really cool. The the faces of people and stuff. I mean,
Oh, well,
that's
that's
the
the
only
thing I
thing.
want to talk about. There's only like one person credited as like the facial animation director, but that one person, if truly that was a job that was led by one person, they deserve a bloody medal. The facial animation is incredible. Now, admittedly, the RE engine has been good at this. Facial animation was great in RE7, and it's been good in 2 and 3, and I think Devil May Cry actually up to this point was the high point, but they are clearly dialing that facial animation in, and it looks great. I mean, give me Street Fighter 5 in this engine, like with Street Fighter 6 rather in this engine with super animations and stuff. I definitely think the RE engine is one of the best third party, non licensed in house engines around. I will say it's got that classic same sort of stuff it had in Resi 7 where there's just someone up close and personal that you occasionally run into a texture where you're like, how did that get there?
Yeah. Agreed.
And I think the first person perspective exacerbates that a little bit because I definitely felt that more in this game and in 7 than I did in 2 and 3. But yeah, on the whole, I think it's just fabulous looking. And I hope, my understanding is the last gen versions run pretty great, but we'll try and find time to test those out at some point and put something on the website on vg247.com about it.
Did it chug anywhere for anyone? I think there were a couple of times where it chugged a bit for me,
Mm.
in some kind of later areas specifically. I'm just wondering how
There are
did
some
it fare for
later
you?
areas where there's a lot of enemies. There are some
Yeah.
later boss battles that are extremely bombastic,
Mm.
and sometimes there the performance chugs a little bit, but nothing that I would actually think to complain about, to be honest.
Yeah. I think it was only when I was shooting the grenade launcher or C4s and mines were going off where the game just went, woo, are you sure? Are you sure? But in
I will
one of
say a
the
lot more enemies in this game as well, in the sense that there's not only more variety of enemies, which is the biggest problem with 7,
yeah,
but also you can probably have you could probably have as many as like 8 dudes on screen at once,
yeah,
maybe more actually. Whereas I'm pretty sure 7 topped out at like 3 or 4.
yeah. We're going a bit over time here, but I would just want to say, the enemies in this game, like the standard Lycans, they don't really do much. They don't really do much. Are they there to just rinse your ammo and potentially your herbs? Because I'm like, what? They're not like, they're just an annoyance. They're not. They're not like a threat. They're just annoying, and they just deplete your ammo because they're just. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean the non-boss ones are definitely not that much more dynamic than zombies. As in,
Yeah,
they come towards you and they attack you. They've got some interesting, unique animations if they grab you, but if you're playing well, they don't grab you.
yeah,
And yeah, I mean, what is there? There's lichens. There's like some sort of husk zombie things in the
yeah.
castle,
There's the armored
um,
variants as
and
well.
there's armored variants. Yep,
The
and there's some
flying.
mechanical enemies. Let's say some
Listen,
augmented. Yeah,
those enemies in particular, just f those enemies in particular.
I think I didn't mind that so much, but I think a lot of people are going to hate that section of the game.
Hated it. That was not fun. I think if you are playing this game and you think you've got loads of ammo and you've got loads of health, you better think again. But by the time you get to that last section, all of it's
Yeah,
gone. All of it
that's
is
the
gone.
section. That was the only section where I was like, "Shit, I've got no ammo. I've got no
Yeah.
crafting resources." I was like, "This is bull," basically. But yeah, I mean, but that's a challenge, right? And and that section is definitely more scary because of that stuff.
Yeah, definitely. So we've got, let's summarize this quickly. So playtime, we are looking at, once you're seasoned, like 2 hours. Yeah.
Yeah,
Once
but
you're
first time
seasoned.
through, it's going to take you 8 to 10, and there's plenty to enjoy in the story. And there's also plenty of replay value, I think, in replays and mercenaries and all the unlocks you get. Because when I talk about the unlocks, there's guns in those unlocks that you can't get
Yeah.
in the normal game. So stuff that unlocks that will let you play the game in a completely different way.
Yeah. So, and enemy types, there are a lot of enemy types variants.
There's a lot compared to 7.
Yeah. Is it scary? Yes, but I'd say it's an atmospheric, like, it's the atmosphere that makes you scared. It's not so much jump out and actually, there's one part, I'm not gonna say what part it is, but there's one where I had to pause the game. When you're so scared you have to pause the game.
Yeah, the way that I describe it, it's more like it's more underworld than paranormal activity, isn't it? It's like
Yeah.
sort of
Yeah.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Difficulty, I played it on the normal difficulty. What difficulty did you guys play it on?
I
just
played it on
normal.
normal, then
Normal,
easy,
yep.
and now I'm playing it on the True Village mode, or whatever it's called, the
Yeah.
hardcore mode.
So did you find normal?
Normal's fine. Yeah,
Normal's
There was
fine.
a
Yeah.
perfectly normal, perfectly good first playthrough. I definitely think if you want to get to know the game after that, go easy first.
Yeah.
It's a way to just explore casually.
Off the top of my head, normal and easy are the same in terms of item locations and stuff. It's just the enemies that are stronger or weaker depending on that. If you're playing hard and you try to use the walkthrough, in 7 the items were in different places. Just so you know.
Just summarize quickly, what do you think of the combat sort of like focus in this one? Even though we did speak about it, you say it's good, bad?
It's fine. I think they showed a lot of stuff early on, which was like, our blocking is important. The irony is, I feel like I didn't use blocking all game, and then when I got to like the final 2 hours, I had to use it all the time, and it sort of caught me off guard. I was like, oh shit, I've got to actually start using this, otherwise I'm going to die. It works, I think the action approach they've gone for, you could probably argue for slightly tighter shooting controls. But I also get that the sort of swimmy way that Ethan moves and the fact that he's a bit slow sort of enhances the terror of when there's loads of enemies bearing down on you. And it's a piece of that character too. It's like, he's not Chris Redfield or Jill or whoever. He's not this military trained beast. And
This is
so
what
I
I blame
appreciate
my
that.
bad aim on. That's what I can blame my terrible headshot accuracy. The headshot percentage was minimal, I tell you. James, what do you think of the combat? Just ever so quickly.
Well, the reticle means nothing. Hip fire means nothing. Like, I think towards the end of the game, I was trying to kind of hip fire the sniper rifle, and
Yep.
it was just shooting the moon every single time. I like the action emphasis. I think that the the focus of or the kind of discourse around Resident Evil's shooting controls for as long as it's been around has been that it's kind of chunky by design and difficult to unwieldy, as Alex says, based on kind of story reasons that it's supposed to be terrifying that you can't whip your gun around to shoot these guys fast enough. But I like it in general. I think the enemy variety does a lot for making the encounters really interesting.
Yeah.
And the bosses are great as per for the series.
Yeah. All right. Anything that anyone just wants to throw in here? Because we have run over time, but it's fine with the power of editing. This is going to be perfect. Anything anyone wants to throw in before we close out?
I'm in the process. As we record this, I'm about halfway through writing a review, but I can tell you now it's going to be a 4-star review. For me, Resident Evil 7 was a 5-star game, so I do think it's not quite as good as 7 or 2, which were both 5-star games for me.
Yeah, definitely.
But it's better than 3, which is great. And I do think it's great, and especially if you really loved 7, which I know a lot of people did, I just think you're going to find so much here to love in terms of the way it builds on and evolves on ideas in 7, and also the way it builds on the story from 7. I really enjoyed in the end where the story went after having a pretty tepid start with it for the first couple of hours. I really got drawn into it. And you can obviously read that written review with more thoughts like that on VG247.com.